Hi, friends. Welcome back to Vigor Active Health Chats. This is Dr. Stephen Newhart, your host. And good news, I was contacted by an old friend, and he's been up to some very interesting stuff. So he asked if he could come on the show. He's actually thinking about starting a show of his own. And the topic is something that I really don't know anything about. I should know something about because I'm in the health industry, but I don't. But we're going to be talking about Kundalini yoga, which I believe is very interesting. It's all about, kind of diving inside yourself, releasing locked emotions. I actually don't even want to speak on it because I'm probably speaking inappropriately on it. So we'll talk to the guest about it. But please welcome Kevin Sapp with me. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I look forward to hearing from you about this. We met a couple years back, and you were very close with Dr. Rollins, and I actually interviewed Dr. Rollins, and we're sad that she's gone now. But what a great woman, what a great mentor she must have been for you. And I know she was a yoga specialist as well, but from all of our talks back when we first met, you're a yoga specialist as well. And I love that. And we have yoga here. I've actually never stepped in the room because as we were talking before, I'm like, I stretch, right? So I stretch myself, but I think there's a whole lot more to it than that. And I think you can, kind of shed some light on the topic. Maybe even tell me the difference between basic yoga and Kundalini, and just I'll ask a few questions, but I really just want to hear from you. So okay. Welcome to the show. Tell me what's on your mind.
All right. Well, in talking about yoga, it's typical when I talk to somebody about yoga, they'll mention something like, I'm not that flexible.
Sure.
Or I need to stretch.
Right.
So there's this idea about yoga that it's this physical practice that involves a lot of stretching.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's true, it's really a small part of what yoga is really all about. The philosophy of yoga is really about discovering more about what our essential nature is. To explore. Sometimes we talk about mind, body, spirit. Mm-hmm. When we get to talking about the spirit part, it's really exploring our own consciousness, our own sense of awareness, our own subjective experience. And in yoga philosophy, it's taught that it's our lack of understanding about what it is that we really are and about the way that things work that causes our problems in life, what we sometimes call suffering. So suffering, a lot of the problems we have are this kind of psychological phenomena that we experience because we don't really have a full and complete understanding of our own consciousness and our own what we call the essential self. And what I mean by that is that we're all made up of this type of programming. It's based on our beliefs, our experiences, our predispositions, what we've been taught by our community, friends, and family. Mm-hmm. And I like to think of it as a type of programming.
Yeah.
That we all have.
Put it, yeah.
Yeah. And it filters our experience in the world. And sometimes that can be very limiting if we have certain types of beliefs that limit or prevent us from moving beyond certain obstacles. Sure. or blocks.
Sure.
Especially those of us that might have experienced childhood trauma or had problems with some mental health problems, anxiety, depression, things like that. So, or addictions. So first, yoga philosophy teaches us that's this identity, this kind of ego structure that we have is not the complete story of what we are. So it gives us tools and techniques to begin to break through that conditioning so that we can discover what it is that lies underneath. And so it's not so much that we're trying to learn new information to try to become this new thing. It's unlearning some of our habits and conditioning so that we discover and begin to experience something that's a little more expansive.
Sure. I mean, we got to go deeper on that because I'm like, okay, tell me more, because it's really, really interesting. And when you said unlearning one interesting thing. I look at it, maybe it's a good analogy, maybe it's not, but the human body is so good at taking care of itself, sometimes even without food. And people are asking me, what do I need to put in to, I got to eat this to get healthier. Is it that, or is it cutting out things that are holding you back, which are like food toxins and whatnot? Usually it's cutting things out of your diet more than putting extra in when you're trying to make a health change, like body wise. Maybe almost sound like the same thing. I've learned this pattern. I've learned this way. And now I need to get rid of some of these blocks, if you will, as you're calling them, so that I can free up my, whatever the best word is, life force. I don't know. I mean, that may be the better, because you're like freeing up your brain, but something's leading you in a different direction. So how do you do that? I mean, you got to give me a little tips. So we're going to go in and we're going to actually start doing this. Is it a meditative process that I'm experiencing while I'm doing yoga, where I'm quieting myself, or what are the steps? How do you lead a class?
There's a lot of different types of practices in yoga. In Kundalini yoga, we mix a lot of them together. So we're using breathing techniques, and we're using sometimes using our hands, finger tapping, along with using a mantra. And so we're combining a mantra and breath work and physical exercise in a way that helps to tap into different states of consciousness. And what I mean by different states of consciousness is really just changing our perceptions, changing our, bringing about a relaxed state in our nervous system. If we're in fight or flight, then our brain is coming up with thoughts and ideas that kind of fuel that fire.
Right.
And so we begin to learn about how the brain and the body is linked. And so you learn that when you can calm your own nervous system through your breath, that your thoughts change. And you begin to have this experience of not being your thoughts as you begin to become more aware of this state of awareness that exists beyond just the thought activity. You build this through techniques like meditation. You build a little bit of space between your mental activity and your experiences and your awareness of those experiences, which is subtle, but it's huge, because it gives you most of the time we're running on autopilot, and we don't really even know. The mind's real quick to kind of make up a story to justify almost anything we're doing. But you and I standing here right now, we don't really even know what our next thought is going to be. Mm-hmm. So in some sense, we're always running on autopilot, and we, with this expanded sense of self-awareness, you gain the ability to interject into your experience in the world in a way that puts you back in control rather than just your conditioning.
Did you have any was there any moments in your life where and that it puts you in a different trajectory?
Well, when I first started practicing, I came into this practice. I was working in the corporate world. I worked for a financial services company in Chicago. I was in the IT department. So we managed trading systems. So it was very chaotic, fast-paced life that I was living. And I had lots of, anxiety and struggled with depression, and always wasn't real satisfied, I guess, with what my life. A lot of success, had all the the material things that I thought I needed, but couldn't really find this sense of happiness and satisfaction.
Sure.
So a friend introduced me to this practice, and I began exploring some of these meditative techniques. And one, I'd always thought of meditation as just this, relaxation or quieting the mind. I didn't know a whole lot about it. And the techniques I was introduced to in the Kundalini yoga practice were they were active. So it gave me something to do with the focus of my eyes, gave me something to do with my fingers. I'm doing something with my breath. So it's combining all these techniques that enabled me to go into this state that was not what I was typically experiencing. And it's not like you just meditate one time and you experience this great transformation, but because I came from a technical background, it began to make sense to me that if I'm doing all these activities and I'm doing them consistently, it's causing my brain to work in a certain way. It's making connections in the brain that aren't that are causing this experience to happen over and over again. So causing different areas of the brain to be activated together and done consistently over and over again, and do that for a certain amount of time every day. It's usually recommended that we do a technique for 40 days to really experience its benefits. So I did this particular technique, and I had been doing it every morning for a couple of weeks. And I was out on the streets of Chicago, where I was living at that time, and had a experience that was very subtle, but it was just all of a sudden I looked around and I saw everybody looking down at their phones and really busy and all this chaos going around. And I felt a little bit more like aware, a little bit above that.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't, like I saw myself having been trapped in that, kind of mental dialogue. And now I was somewhat freed from it a little bit. It was
aware of what.
Explain it to people. It's like when I first went into, I wear contacts. When I first went to the eye doctor when I was younger, I didn't realize that I didn't see good until you go and you get these tests and they put the little things on you, and all of a sudden, you're like, wow, you didn't even know that you weren't seeing clearly before. And it was kind of like that, like a little dial had been turned, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I had this experience that was very subtle, but it was very real. And I knew there was something there. It made me curious. And I'd spent lots of time in therapy when I was younger, dealing with some of the struggles I had. And a lot of that was about understanding why I came to be the way that I was. But nobody had really showed me anything or taught me anything to change my brain. So there were certain aspects about the way my mind and nervous system worked and how I responded to things that I experienced. And as I began to employ these techniques and learning how to calm my nervous system, then my habitual way of responding to the world started to change. It was very refreshing. And
well, that's an amazing breakthrough that you had there. And I think that individuals watching this are going to want that as well, because the world is that way. I actually, I'm sitting here thinking about what you're saying. I like living in Fort Worth because Fort Worth doesn't really operate at that. It's not as high of we're kind of laid back. Like we try to be more laid back than the rest. So we just kind of keep it a little bit like this. But I know that there's situations like that. I know there's places like that. But obviously that experience got you out of there and made you completely change the trajectory. And now you do something completely different, moving away from that. Or maybe you got this awareness of, sometimes, so I deal in the brain a little bit in the medical space. And when we realign coherence, which could happen, what you're talking about, brain connectivity and whatnot, the brain remembers. It almost wakes up, because usually that only happens to people once they get a little bit older. Brain wakes up and realizes this is bad for me and I need to stop doing this or my health is going to go the wrong direction. So I'm totally with you. And sadly, though, we are running out of time, but I think we should carry on this conversation soon, have you back on. And I did hear you're going to do your own show too, hopefully in the near future. So I'll tell people to look for Kevin Sapp on, any podcast channel coming soon and sign into that, because I think it will be groundbreaking. So, but thanks for being here today. It's a pleasure. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Vigor Active Health Chats.